Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial on the responsive functionalities of Creator. Responsive design is traditionally used in web design when we want a website to display a certain way on a computer screen and another way on a smartphone. Nowadays, we are starting to encounter the same problem in motion design with the rise of social media. Indeed, it is now common to create square videos for Instagram or vertical videos to publish as stories. In this tutorial, we will cover all the tools available in Creator that will help you create responsive videos quickly and easily in After Effects. If we modify the size of our composition by doing Ctrl+K, then entering 1080 by 1080, to make it a square composition, we can notice that nothing is adapting. That's perfectly normal, as After Effects has no way to know how to display the elements in the composition based on the composition size. The second issue we have is that when we change the size of the composition, all the pre-compositions in it kept their same size. I'm considering them issues, but it's actually perfectly normal, and it is how After Effects behaves by default. However, we have a quick way to solve these issues by using the Resizers. Resizers will allow you to quickly switch between composition size simply by clicking on them. At the moment, we have Portrait, which is 1080 by 1920, Square, which is 1080 by 1080, and Landscape, which is 1920 by 1080. You also have the option to use your own dimension by clicking on Custom. I will start by clicking on Landscape to put the template back to its original size, then click on Square. You may be wondering why I've done that, as we just end up with the same thing as before. Well, there is actually a difference. If you open your pre-composition background, you will notice that it has also been redimensioned to a square format. And if you open the pre-composition grid, you will notice it has also been redimensioned. However, if you go back to our template composition and open the pre-composition versus, you will notice that the pre-composition hasn't been resized. The way it works is that when you're using a resizer, Creator will resize all the pre-compositions that are the same size as the main composition when using a scale of 100, and will leave untouched all the pre-compositions that have a different size. In the last section, we have seen how to resize compositions using Creator. However, none of the elements in the composition are currently placed properly. Don't worry, we will be able to fix this using ratio switchers. Ratio switchers are effects that will return a value depending on the composition size selected. Let's assume that with the square format, we don't want the Pundit's opinion to appear, we want the score to be moved lower, and the team name and logo to be smaller and higher in the composition. First, I will start by applying a ratio switcher to the score pre-composition. To do so, I will select its position property and click on Apply Switcher to Selected Properties. If I have a look at the effect panel of the score composition, I can notice that an effect Danim Ratio Switcher Position has been applied. In this effect, you have the parameter Result, that is the value of the effect, value that is now acting as the position value of the composition. This result value is taken from the portrait, square, or landscape values depending on what resizer is currently being used. As we are currently in a square format, the result value will be taken from the square values. We will keep square x at 540 and will modify square y to 880. As you can see, the result value is automatically adapting as well as the position of the composition. Now, if I click on Resizer Landscape, the value of the result parameter will be 540 by 540, as it is the value of the landscape parameters. We will change landscape X to 960 and keep the landscape Y at 540. So now, if I switch between Resizer Square and Resizer Landscape, you can see that the position of the score pre-composition is adapting automatically. We could have used a Danim anchor to always have the score precomposition centered in the main composition, but I wanted to keep this first example as simple as possible. However, most of the remaining layers we will be modifying do have a Danim anchor applied on them, so if you haven't watched the tutorial on Danimbox, I highly recommend you to do so, otherwise there is a risk you may not understand everything. By the way, if you were wondering why the currently live layer was moving with the score precomposition, it is because it has a Danim anchor effect applied on it. Same thing with the versus composition at the beginning. Alright, now it is time to get rid of the pundit's opinion precomposition. We could move it outside of the composition in order to have it not rendered, but instead, we are going to add a ratio switcher on its opacity. Simply select the opacity property, then click on Apply Switcher to Selected Properties. Now we can bring down the square value to 0 and the pundit's opinion precomposition will no longer be visible. If we switch between the square and the landscape resizer, we can check that everything is working perfectly. Below the portrait, square and landscape values, you may have noticed a parameter named square tolerance. This parameter sets a tolerance range within which your element will be subject to a ratio switcher. What I mean by that is that, for example, if I click on Resizer Custom and set the width to 1000, all the elements in my composition will still be subject to the square ratio switcher. This is because my square tolerance is set at 0.1, which means that whenever my composition is within 10% of one of the resizer size, its ratio switcher will apply. The square tolerance parameter is set from 0 to 1, so that's why 0.1 is equivalent to 10%. So if I decide to resize my composition to 1850 by 980, you can see that all my elements display following the landscape ratio switcher, as the composition is within 10% of the landscape size. Alright, now that we have clarified the square tolerance, let's go over the one-dimension switcher and two-dimension switcher. To demonstrate their utility, I'm going to create a new composition that I will call 1D and 2D switchers. Alright, so first let's create a single shape square of 100 by 100. What we will want to do is add a wiggle effect on its position that has a value changing depending on the resizer being used. To do so, I will create a null object and add a one-dimension switcher on it. Then I will add a wiggle expression on the position of my square. I will choose a frequency of 1, and for the amplitude, I will select the result parameter of the ratio switcher. In portrait, I will enter 200, in square I will enter 10, and in landscape I will select 500. Let's preview the animation so you can see how our square is moving. As you can see, its amplitude is quite wide, as it is currently 500. Now, if I click on Resizer Square and preview the animation, you can see that the square amplitude has been reduced drastically, as it is now subject to an amplitude of 10. Same thing if I click on Resizer Portrait, the amplitude of the square is now 200. Alright, let's delete the wiggle expression and turn our square into a 3D layer. Normally, I would also have to add a camera as always when using 3D layers. Indeed, using 3D layers without a camera may bring some issue in the positioning of your layers between them. In this particular example, it's not required to add a camera to show you the ratio switchers, but be aware that you will have to add one in most cases. One issue you may face when using 3D layers is when you try to apply a ratio switcher to its position, you will notice that the Z position isn't taken into account. Fortunately, there is an easy workaround. Let's go back to our null object and add a two-dimension switcher to it. The 2-dimension switcher will be used for the X and Y position of the 3D layer, and the 1-dimension switcher will be used for the Z position. So let's add the expression on the square position. Var X equal the first value of the 2D switcher, var Y equal the second value of the 2D switcher, and var Z equal the result of the 1D switcher. Then we simply need to return a table with X, Y, and Z. Now, if I modify the 1-dimension switcher, you can see that the Z position of the square is changing, and if I modify the 2-dimension switcher, the X and Y position of the square will be changing. Of course, it's still subject to the resizer, so if I change to landscape, you can see that the square is using the landscape ratio switcher. Alright, now that we have clarified all the ratio switcher's functionalities, we can go back to our template composition and fix the position of our team logos. Each team logo has a Danim Anchor effect applied on it that has been created using the Danim Anchor functionality here. Our Danim Anchor effect has a target detection on composition, target align on center-center, and source anchor on center-center. I'm going to select logo team 1 box and logo team 2 box, and in their parameters, I will select X offset and Y offset, then click on Apply Switcher on selected properties. Switchers have been applied on all parameters at once. For box logo team 1, I'm going to change square X offset to -300, and for box logo team 2, I'm going to change square X offset to 300. Our logos are still too big, but don't worry, we will cover dynamic images size in the next section, so I will leave them like this for now. The last elements we need to adapt are team 1 name and team 2 name. I'm going to start with team 1 name and will hide team 2 name so I can see what I'm doing. First, I will make the box visible and select Preview Max Size to see the maximum size the text box is susceptible to be. As you can see, the current text box is way too big. To fix this, we will go to FX, Box Settings, Box Size, and add a ratio switcher on delta X and delta Y. Then, in square delta X, I will choose 380, and in square delta Y, 150. Alright, now the box size seems correct, but we still need to adapt its position. Box team 1 has a Danim Anchor effect applied on it, with target detection on composition, target align on left top, and source anchor on center-center. To modify the position, I will therefore go to Danim Anchor, Offset, and add a ratio switcher on X offset and Y offset. In X offset square, I will enter 240. And in Y offset square, I will leave it on 220, but you will see that we will need to modify it with the portrait resizer. Our box team 1 is now set, so I can go back to team 1 layer and set preview on final. Alright, so now if I make my team 2 layer visible, you will notice that its size has changed and is the same as team 1 layer. This is because team 2 layer is parented to team 1 layer, as we have seen in the fundamentals tutorial. So we only need to modify its position. The process is the exact same one as for team 1, so I will speed up the video for you. Alright. So now, if I switch between Resizer Square and Landscape, you can see that everything works perfectly. Finally, we need to set up the Portrait Resizer. The process will be the exact same as for the Square Resizer, so I'm going to cut the video and I will catch up with you after I have set the ratio switcher for the portrait composition. Alright, so the portrait ratio switchers have been set. However, I haven't modified the team names, as there is a subtlety worth mentioning. As you can see, both team names are very high in the composition, as their Danim Anchor effects are targeting the top corners of the composition. We can actually change that using the ratio switchers, as they indeed work on select parameters. To do so, we will go to Effects, Danim Anchor, and apply a ratio switcher on target detection. If you go to the effect panel, you can see that the ratio switcher target detection has been created with a value of 4. The way it works is that each option in the drop-down list has a number starting from 1. So target layer will be 1, upper nearest box will be 2, lower nearest box will be 3, and composition will be 4. In our case, we will want the target detection to be set on target layer, so we will change the portrait target detection to 1. We will make sure we are targeting the box logo team 1 and will position the layer correctly using the offset ratio switchers. Once done, we can now repeat the operation for team 2 name. Finally, we can check that the template is working with all sizes. Our template is currently working on all sizes, except for the images that are not sized properly. To fix this, we will use a similar technique than the one we used when resizing the Team 1 name layer. Indeed, we will add a ratio switcher to the width, height, delta X and delta Y of the logo Team 1. Once applied, I will make the box visible so I can see what I'm doing. First, I will set the minimum size, so I will select min size. I will slightly increase the height of the box and set it at 330. Alright, now let's have a look at the max size. The logo is too big in my opinion, so to reduce its size, I will go to ratio switcher delta X, then reduce the square parameter to 160. Then I will do the same thing for delta Y and set it at 60. Alright, now let's modify the size with the portrait resizer. We will first check the minimum size. I will make it a bit bigger and set the height at 375 and 300 for the width. Now let's check the max size. I will bring down the delta X to 190 and the delta Y to 70. Alright, logo team 1 is now set, so let's double check minimum size is good with all formats. And now we can check that maximum size is good with all formats. As you can see, logo team 1 is displaying nicely for all the resizer options and is ready to go. To set the logo team 2, you would have to follow the exact same process, so I'm going to skip it and I will catch up with you in the next section. Alright, now let's have a look at the generation form. As you can see, we currently don't have the option to select the composition size. To add it to the generation form, we will have to go to the Builder tab, then to the Ratios section. Here, simply click on Add Resolution and enter the dimensions of your ratio switchers. The first one corresponds to our landscape size, so we will leave it as it is. For the second one, we will enter 1080 in width, and you can see that Creator automatically recognizes that it corresponds to our square size. Then I can add a third resolution and enter 1920 in height and 1080 in width, and Creator will recognize our portrait size. Now I can simply switch between each resolution by clicking on this eye icon. When entering a resolution, you're free to enter the dimension you want. However, if it hasn't been set in the Modules tab, it obviously won't render properly. To delete a resolution, you can simply click on the cross icon. If we go back to the generation form, we can see that we now have the option to choose the ratio we want. However, if I select Portrait, you will notice that we are missing a thumbnail. That's perfectly normal, as we haven't created thumbnails yet for all our ratios. To fix this, we can go to the builder and select Update Thumbnails All. By clicking on it, Creator will create a thumbnail for each ratio and each color theme. So it might take some time if you have a massive template with lots of different color themes. Now you can go back to the generation form and you will be able to see a preview for the ratio you want, with the theme you want. Finally, if you upload an image, you will notice that the cropping range isn't following the rules you have set up in the ratio switchers. Well, that's simply because we haven't yet actualized the auto-rig. So if you have a look in Logo Team 1, then Expert Mode, you can see that none of the ratio switchers settings have been applied. To fix this, we'll simply click on Actualize Auto-rig. Once done, if you go back to Logo Team 1, you will notice that all the ratio switchers have been taken into account. So now, if you go back to the generation form, you will see that the image crop is done based on the ratio switcher settings. We have now covered everything you need to know to use the responsive functionalities of Danim Creator. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask it on our Discord, and if you enjoyed this tutorial, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel.